Morning. We'll get started with accounts receivable register reports today. So when we go through accounts receivable register reports, and when it's talk about the registration forms that were completed to see how often people are using the reports or what reports they're using. And so the most common answer for this is that people who are responding are using the report weekly. Some people never, some monthly, and nobody uses these reports on a daily basis. And it looks like the most common answer for the type of report used is deposit register. So today we're going through the sales register, the receipts register, deposits register. We'll show examples for how this works and why the sales register and receipts register can be important to use in addition to the deposits register. So in Intacct, the sales register is the report that displays the invoices sent to customers in a specified time period, as well as any account adjustments that were entered. Each transaction that is listed shows the date, customer ID, name, invoice or adjustment number, due date, a description if we used one, amount, and amount paid. So we get a lot of information from this report. If we're looking for drawdowns, this would list every single drawdown created for a period of time we select, including a specific customer if we wanted it to. So using this report, we can see the invoices and adjustments, see the payment details, see credit details if credits were issued, and see the subtotals of invoice amounts by customers' location, customers or their location, meaning their checkbook. And when viewing this report in the HTML view, the dates in the date column are links that enable us to drill down to the transaction itself. And HTML is the version that we see inside of Intacct. So let's jump into Intacct on the sales receipt, the sales register report. So this report is going to be found in accounts receivable under registers, and we have sales and we have receipts. So sales is where we're going to go first, and any report in Intacct is going to ask us first for the period of time that we're looking at. We can use the drop-down box to select a predetermined period of time and an as of date. So right now this report always defaults to the current month and whatever the current day is. If we leave it on current month, we can change the as of date to change the month that's going to be reported. So with a February date, it's going to report February's activity for the full month since this is the current month. If I change this to January, that means it's going to be the current month in January since the as of date would now say January. And that would work like that for any of these other selections for fiscal year, current year, quarters. Any of those things are going to be driven by what the as of date is. If we're not sure or we don't want to use the top section, we can override these selections by picking both a start date and an end date. So for now, we're going to leave it on current month. So those are our date selections. Next is the how are we going to filter this report? What are we going to tell Intacct that we want to generate for the information? First thing is customer. We can leave it blank, or we can choose a specific customer. So we're going to look at a drawdown for BIA. So I'm going to select them so we don't get any other information in this report. We can use customer type. Depending on the program that's using this report, customer type could be valuable. We can see like daycare here. They designate their customers through 3 different types. Self-pay, people that receive state assistance for daycare, or people that receive tribal assistance. So if they were only wanting to run the report for a certain type of customer, they could do that by selecting here rather than running one customer at a time or all of them. The same thing for TED loans. If we wanted to see the invoices we've generated, we can select the type of customer that we want to research. So if we only wanted this information for tribal employees, then we can do that, or for the other organizations that are allowed to get TED loans. We do not use territory, so there'll be nothing in the Dropbox, nothing to pick, so we're going to leave that area alone. We do have to put a checkbook in a program. So we're going to use checkbook 42 and roads for this one. The next part of the filters is here with displaying details, payment details, credit details, or hiding paid documents. Pretty much they're verbatim what they are. If we want to display transaction details, we can checkbox this, and that's going to add the general ledger accounts that were used in the sales transaction or the invoice transaction. It's going to add what was put in the memo field, and it'll also add the program and checkbook to the report. So I'm going to leave it unchecked for now. Payment details is going to add the method of payment used and the payment instrument number. So if we wanted to know the check number or the bank confirmation number, money order, those kinds of things, and we wanted that displayed in the report, we can hit this checkbox. If we want to see credit details, meaning we've issued an accounts receivable credit adjustment, and we want to see the details to that, and we're going to checkbox that. If we use show credit details, all the other detail options have to be selected in order for it to be used. So we would get a pretty detailed report. And if we do not want to see paid documents, we only want to see outstanding documents, we could check that so we don't see the paid stuff. We're only looking for things we haven't paid yet. And then finally, formatting. How do we want to sort the report? Do we want it in order by customer name, ID, date, descending date, amount descending, the amount paid descending? However we want that organized. Doing it by amounts or the due dates could be pretty helpful, especially the amount part for descending. So when we're looking for amounts, if we're expecting a lot of invoices, sorting these by amount would be easier to find a specific dollar amount we're looking for. For now, I'm gonna leave it customer name since we're only looking for one customer. So when we go to view this report, it's going to give us information for the month of February. And we can see on screen that for the month of February for Department of Interior BIA, for that customer, we have a drawdown 11537 that was due on February 4th. Here's a description for what was used and the amount that was due, and we can see that it's been paid. So this information is what's given to us for the month of February. We can expand on the report. So if we looked at the details, and we come back and rerun this report, a lot more information is going to display. So much more it actually goes off screen. So let me change the size so we can see it. Now we get added the account number that was used. Here's the program and checkbook. Here's what was in the memo field. Here's the document and the payment type. So we know it was an electronic funds transfer, probably an ACH, and whatever number that our accounts receivable department uses when they receive these payments. So a valuable report and looking these up, but we're also going to expand the date on this actually. I want to use the full fiscal year so far. So instead of now using the top part, I'm overriding that with a start date and an end date. For all the same settings we have now. And what this is going to bring up is 3 different drawdowns, 1159, 11060, 11537. All using the same account number, all for roads and the checkbook 42 because that's what we selected at the filter screen. But an interesting thing we see is this very first one from December 1st that was due December 2nd for $177,000 still sits unpaid. So this is a valuable report to use because now we've spotted a potential problem with this drawdown. We're a little over 2 months into this not being paid. If we're the program monitor or if we're the program that uses accounts receivable and sees this, this is a signal to us that we need to take action and figure out why this hasn't been paid. Was the payment received but applied to a different invoice? whatever it is that we need to determine, was there a drawdown that was supposed to happen we didn't do? This should prompt new action from us to check. Because we're using the HTML version, the date has a hyperlink on it. So if I click the date, it takes us to the bill or to the invoice. It would have the attachment for whatever this is supposed to be for, so we could research that further if we needed to. Hope is adding that the payment hasn't been received, so. But obviously stands out from here. If I customize this report and say hide paid documents, we'd expect those other two to disappear and just that one to show up on the report now. And there's the result we would expect. So good report for looking at our bills, at our drawdowns, any of our invoices that we create. So now I wanted to move to the next report, which is the receipts register. Now we're going to look at the payments that were received and should have been posted in these situations. So the receipts register in Intacct allows us to drill down to the invoices to which the receipts were applied, allows us to drill down to the customer's information if we need it, to reverse transactions, and to locate payments that might not have been fully applied where the amount received is greater than the amounts applied. Okay. And this allows us to display the list in detail or no detail, kind of like what we've seen here. And we can even restrict it to receipts that haven't been deposited. So if we're looking for undeposited funds, we can use this report to do just that. If we see an undeposited funds balance on our dashboard or our trial balance reports. So I'm gonna leave this up so we can just compare the two reports. So we'll go to a different tab, accounts receivable, registers, and receipts. And functionally, just like the sales receipts report or any general ledger report that we've had the opportunity to see, we need to give it a period of time. So let's do that. Let's do the fiscal year like we did on the other side now. Here's our customer. Hope is aware that the payment hasn't been received, but we might not be. So we're going to act as though we don't know that the payment hasn't been received. We're going to use checkbook 42. And we're going to use all programs. So maybe we've applied this somewhere else. We're going to research and rule that out right now. Do we need to see details of the payments being received, or do we want undeposited receipts only? In this case, no, we're looking for all the payments because we're looking for this possible $177,000 that could have been applied somewhere else. How do we want to sort this? By the date or by the amount? Let's sort it by amount. And now we're ready to run the receipts register. So now we can see all the payments we've received for fiscal year 22 so far. They're in order by amount. So it starts with the least dollar amount going all the way to the highest amount posted so far this year. We're looking for $177,984. We don't see that exact amount here. So we would know if that was an individual payment. That certainly hasn't been posted. If we've determined that one of these higher amounts included the $177,000, we have the option to reverse the payment here from this report, and then we can go back and reapply to make sure we've applied the payments correctly if that were the case. Or from here we might have determined, as Hope has already said, payment hasn't been received. So we have that confirmation now. We still have our outstanding drawdown. Program Monitor can take whatever actions necessary to resolve that. An unpaid bill cannot be resolved by a journal entry. So if we did a journal entry to clear this out of accounts receivable, this bill still stays outstanding. So if we take the next step to either a payment does come in or we do an adjustment to credit the bill back to zero, we would end up duplicating the balances and creating an extra credit balance basically in accounts receivable. So any of the activity we see on these reports will never be resolved by journal entry. All right. The last report we're going to look at is a deposits register. Hope, do you use the deposits register? So we're going to go to cash management, registers, and deposits. And so this is going to let us look at a list of our deposits. So if we wanted to look for just the current month, and we find whatever checkbook it is that we want to see. So checkbook 42. And I leave this alone and click view. We're going to see no deposits. And of course, if we're paying invoices directly and not through the steps of doing undeposited funds first and creating a deposit, we would never find the payments that are being applied directly to an invoice as a bank payment. So the drawdowns will never be found here. So not surprising you would use this or not at all. Now, if we're working the TED program, this would be a valuable report to use because we're probably receiving payments as an undeposited fund and having to create a deposit first. If we're using the deposits action here in cash management to receive like miscellaneous revenue through the general fund and stuff like that, those types of deposits we can find on this register. So if we've changed this to checkbook 9, which is the TED program, and we click view, once this posts, this gives us a list of the 3 deposits that have been completed so far this month for the TED program. If we're researching a problem with that, here we can already take action to reverse that directly here rather than having to go through the list of all the deposits in accounts receivable, especially if we have a lot of different types of access or there's a lot of deposits. It might be easier to run it here because we can choose the period of time without having to create that manually on a list screen. We can click the dollar amounts to click into each deposit to see what makes up those dollar amounts. And I won't do that for this one. But if we click show receipts and then click view, the deposits would then be detailed rather than summarized, and we would know which employee's payroll deduction contributed to each of those deposits. So if we were looking to see, if I were a customer of the TED program and we're looking to make sure that my payroll deductions are being included in these deposits, we click show details and run this report. We could find all of my deductions very easily within the deposit receipts and deposit slips. All right, so that's going to lead us to this little scenario. Most commonly, when Lori is doing a bank rec and she can't complete a deposit, she's going to see something like this on her screen, on the bank reconciliation screen under cash management. So in this case, in January, she's trying to do the bank rec for solid waste, checkbook 90. She has 4 payments she cannot tie out that's listed in Intacct, but not listed at the bank for this day. So we can see that these payments were recorded January 18th. Here's the different check numbers, here's the amounts. These are the customers that the payments were recorded for. This tells us transaction type, it's deposits and credits for the bank. And the payment type, AR receipts, meaning we've received these payments through Intacct, through the invoice without using the undeposited funds portion. So if she took a screenshot of like the drawdowns for Hope and sent this over, this and something didn't match, AR receipts just tells us the method that we received the payment as. So Lori is going to reach out to the program and tell them, you have these 4 check numbers on this date that aren't shown in the records for the bank. So I'm a program, how am I going to research this to resolve? If I'm getting this message for the TED program, how would I research this to solve, right? So the GL posting date from this, so when Lori shares the date to you, is the date the transaction posted to the general ledger, or the deposit date if processed as undeposited fund. Bank date if the payment was received as a posted payment instead. AR receipts tells us that the payment was posted to the bank, so Lori can share that information with the program she's reaching out to. So we already have an idea of how to start looking for this. Otherwise, if it said deposit slips, it would tell us that the payment was processed as an undeposited fund. So we need to ask ourselves, why would we have a record of a deposit in Intacct that doesn't have a matching record at the bank? Number one, do we still have possession of the monetary instruments? Did we record this in Intacct but not send the money to finance to go to the bank? Did we record this in Intacct today but not send it to finance until tomorrow? So there's just a mismatch on dates? Or are these duplicate entries? So we're going to look at, see how can we make that determination. So we're not talking about invoicing. So the sales register might not fit for what we're looking for. We're not talking about payments that were received as deposits. These were received as accounts receivable receipts, which means they were as posted payments. So our deposit register is not going to help us in this situation. The receipts register is what's going to be helpful in determining how these payments, whether or not these could be duplicate entries. If the payments were receipted to that day, January 18th, but they didn't actually go to the bank till the 19th, Lori would at least be aware of that on her bank statement, because she would have a bank transaction on the 19th that doesn't tie out to anything that day, but ties out to the 18th. So if she's reaching out to you already to tell you to correct this, we can probably be assured that it hasn't been posted to just another day. So we're going to research this by using the receipts register. We're talking about January payments. So we're going to go to accounts receivable, receipts register. I can change this as of date, January 31st, without having to punch in the start and end dates. We're going to use that customer tree of life. Solid waste is checkbook 90. And do we want to see details right now or undeposited funds? For now, let's not include details. We'll just leave this like a summary type of report. And how do we want to sort this? Receipt date or amount? So let's try amount as the one, because it'll be easier to find those two amounts that Lori sent. So let's view this report. And I'm going to take a screenshot of what Lori would have. So we're looking for amounts of $720.72 and $120.12. So we can see 4 different receipts for $720.72. But what we see right now is on January 25th, we received check 13449 and 13448. January 18th, we received the same 2 check numbers. So we're feeling pretty good right now that those are duplicate entries. We've received these payments twice. What about the 12012? Check 13450 and 13452 on 125. And on 118, the day in question, same check numbers for the same amounts to the same customer. So it took very little effort in reality to make that determination. Darn it, we have posted these payments twice. So now we have a responsibility to go find these duplicate payments posted to January 18th, posted as posted payments. So we would go to posted payments and reverse those to correct this issue. We see they've been deposited to other days, so we don't need to receive these again. We need to remove these from our records. So we're going to reverse those to January 18th to get those duplicate payments out. And then when we're done, we can notify Lori that we've resolved the issue, tell her it's a duplicate payment, and now she can move forward with her bank reconciliation, knowing that we have now corrected the problem. In this, Intacct doesn't care if you duplicate these transaction numbers. So it's very important that things like these receipts registers are used to your advantage to make sure that if we're receiving a payment for a customer, if we're receiving this to 2 different days, on one of these days we didn't have possession of these payments. And that should be a flag to us that we might be duplicating these. We can run a report like this and search for those check numbers. And of course, we can run this for any period of time, so we're not limited to just 1 month. We can look at this for 1, 2, 3 months or more if we need to. On the screen, if we weren't sure about the check numbers, if you haven't used it before, if you hit Control F on your keyboard, a little search bar pops up. So now if I use the same check numbers that were used, 13448 was 1, it lights up twice on screen. So a lot easier that we don't have to actually verify individually all of those check numbers. We can now easily see the check numbers because they've been highlighted for us by using Control F, which is Control Find. All right, so those are the 3 register reports that as receivables managers, receivables accountants, we need to make a regular part of our day. Does it matter which deposit that you reverse? Yes, it would matter. Like if we're talking about this situation here, I'm gonna bring this screenshot from the bank rec on screen. Lori's gonna reach out and tell us that on January 18th is the record that doesn't match the bank. So when we bring up this report, we see the duplicate payments, one on 125 and one on 118. If we reverse the 125 entry but not the 118 one, we've now made it so she can't reconcile 2 different transactions. She can't reconcile January 25th because we've taken those payments out, so now the bank doesn't match Intacct on 2 days. We know from what she would send us, January 18th is the day in question. So January 18th is the day we want to reverse those payments. So our job, our responsibility is to make sure our records match as closely as possible what the bank has. Good question. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.